The full moon shines over the darkened forest, coating it in nocturnal brightness. Through its scattered branches and diseased trees, two hooded figures make their way deeper. Deeper and yet deeper. They're a pair of superficially unremarkable youngsters, shunned from society for reasons unknown, and with nowhere left to run. In the darkest parts of the Valahian countryside, they seek asylum in the only place that will still give it out. They reach the demonic castle of the elusive Count Vlad Tepes, seeming to cast this very night. As they approach the gates, one of them seems to hesitate. Is this really the right choice? Falling deeper in the rabbit hole? But Isaac has no doubts in his mind. For someone like him, what other future could there be? The story I'm about to tell is fully disclosed in Akumado Dracula Yami no Juin, a 2-volume manga authored by Kosa Sakura, supervised by Koji Igarashi, and published between 2005 and 2006. It mostly takes place before the events of Dracula's Curse, and gives us some insights into Dracula's operations to exterminate humanity as payback for his wife's execution. Specifically, the manga focuses on two newly introduced characters, Isaac and Hector, both of them humans but tainted by something foul, servers of the Count, enemies of mankind. I mentioned last video that Vlad sometimes accepted human guests into his castle, one of the bigger examples being his wife. But there were many others. There were all kinds of weird people out there procuring obscure knowledge or seeking to develop supernatural talents. Before the fated witch hunt, Vlad was quite accepting of people like that. Maybe their thirst for forbidden knowledge reminded him of himself 3 centuries earlier. Regardless, Isaac and Hector's cases were along these lines. Hector is more or less the hero of our story, if we can even call him that. He was born to a poor rural family and he had a special talent of sorts. He was able to easily befriend animals of all kinds. Even animals of the night, such as wolves, owls, black cats, they all crowded around him. Now this is obviously very bizarre, and it was not seen with good eyes by the very superstitious people of his village. Hector was shunned as a cursed child. He spent his early years chased around town by mobs of wicked kids, physically abused by his mother, and completely ignored by his father. His father, who, by the way, was an alchemist, a very petty and greedy alchemist who wasn't much liked by the villagers either. And of course, the weight of that fell onto Hector's shoulders as well. This went on for years until he could no longer bear it. It was when Hector invoked the name of God, hoping he would get him out of his misery, that something finally changed in his life. The local church caught fire, and the blame was immediately pinned on Hector, even though he had no idea what was going on. Once again, Hector escaped from a pursuing mob, this time never to return. He simply could not. The miracle of the burning church had been performed not by God, but by the animals around him, watching as he sunk deeper into the forest. They spoke to him in dissonant whispers. They'd saved him, they said. He should find his new place, they said. And thus he arrived at the Count's castle, alone not too long after Isaac had done so, and on a similar looking night. And Isaac, you could say, is the villain of our story. For the years that followed, under Dracula's wing, they would both study the eldritch arts of devil forging, an obscure form of alchemy centering on the conjuration and materialization of demonic entities. Real advanced stuff which most humans can't even dream of, but they had a natural affinity for it. When Lisa Tepes died at the stake and Dracula declared war, they stood by his side as devil forge masters, his generals. By then, they already held power and skill comparable to those of death. While this is never directly confirmed, it's very likely that they used their abilities to fill up the Count's armies with many of the night creatures we fight in Castlevania 3. They played a central role in his plan for absolute genocide, and that was okay. Neither of them were particularly fond of humans in the first place. At least that's what Dracula thought. When Trevor Belmont marched towards Valahia, Dracula sent Hector to personally take care of him. This decision bothered Isaac. While he respected Hector as a fellow general, he never liked him that much. Hector was very much Dracula's favorite, and he really resented that. But he didn't have the courage to pipe up, of course. With a few demons by his side then, Hector left the castle to seek out the Belmont, and leaving Isaac behind. And then he never came back. So Hector never actually met Trevor. In fact, it was never his intention to actually do so. He wasn't that down with the whole exterminate humanity idea. It seems deep within himself, Hector still held on to his human side. He'd gone along with Dracula for a while, true, but working for him had taken its toll, and he was ready to give up on his life, if that's what it took. This devil forgery business had gone too far. In an attempt to escape Dracula's grasp, Hector battled the monsters that traveled along him, but though he won, he was critically injured, and probably figured that was about it for his life. And it would have been it, indeed, if he hadn't been saved by a passing woman named Rosalie. In total contrast to Hector, Rosalie was just a normal woman. She worked as a nun for a small church in the countryside, and was generally well beloved by the people who knew her, especially the many children she helped take care of. When she stumbled upon that dying man by the roadside, she chose to drag him with her, bringing him to the church where he'd be able to heal. This decision on her part was very contentious. She was the only person who lived at the church, and now here she was, living alone with this mysterious man of almost ghostly white hair she just dragged from the middle of nowhere. You have to remember, the times were not good. Dracula was at war with humankind, and the townsfolk were very suspicious of anything that smelled of monsters or demons. And in this case, they were more or less right. The creepy black bird who kept following Hector around was a dead giveaway, after all. When Hector awoke, he decided to just not do anything. His wounds hadn't fully healed, so he couldn't leave, and even if he did, there was nowhere he could go. At least inside the church, protected by God, he was able to hide his presence from his former lord. Though this wouldn't last for long, of course. Dracula knew fully well that Hector hadn't died. After all, the Belmonts had still been very far away when he stopped reporting. From the very beginning, the Count suspected treason, and to investigate this, he sent his second Devil Forge Master, Isaac. Isaac initially resisted the idea. To leave the castle would mean leaving the castle unguarded by Dracula's generals, and he feared the results of that. But there was no arguing. Leaving with 2 other men and a werewolf, his instructions were clear. Find Hector and bring him back alive. To waste his talents, said Dracula, would be a shame. Isaac's personal plans were a little different, however. Since Hector was deliberately hiding his powers, Isaac couldn't sense him, so he sent the werewolf ahead to track him by his scent. And so he did. As the werewolf broke into the church at the dead of night, threatening to devour Rosalie and a local boy who happened to be around there, the worries of the villagers rings very true. The white-haired man really meant only trouble. At first, he even resisted doing anything at all. He couldn't use his powers after all, he was hiding, and he wasn't exactly a generous person, which is very in line with his backstory. But as the werewolf advanced, Hector concluded further pretending was wholly pointless. The werewolf had tracked him by his scent. If even hiding in a church wouldn't work, nothing would. There was no escape for Hector. He drew his sword, called back his bird, and once again conjuring his unholy magic, transformed him into a devil. Against the cursed power of a devil forgery, a mere werewolf was no match. He didn't have time to explain himself to Rosalie or the boy. Hector knew he had just painted an enormous target on his back, so fleeing through the rain, he attempted to get far away, but was faced with visions of darkness, his past haunting him. He fell to the ground, tried using a fairy devil to heal himself a bit, but before he was done, Isaac arrived. Isaac had been ordered to bring Hector back alive, but that's not what he was set on doing. From the very first time they had met, back at the castle, Isaac despised Hector. He knew his talent was greater than his darkness was deeper. For years now, Isaac had been itching for a chance to impale this man on the tip of his spear, to become Dracula's sole devil forger, only general, his favorite. To Isaac, Dracula was everything, and Hector had been standing in his way. And here was his chance to finally become his best. He'd already killed the two men who'd been accompanying him. Right here, in the middle of the forest, there was no one to stop him from dealing justice with his own two hands. Hector was so weak he could barely fight, much less conjure devils. Isaac was playing with him. He could easily win. For a moment, he even changed his mind, offering to let Hector live if only he'd return as Dracula's servant. But Hector laughs at this. He sought the power of devil forgery all for himself, because he thought his power could protect him in this unjust world. He's nothing like Isaac, no mere pawn in someone else's game. He feels no obligation towards Dracula, and no need to return. Isaac is obviously furious upon hearing this. As they advance to conclude this fight, lunging at each other, they feel something different. It is the year 1476. As they stare in shock at a castle in the distance, they both realize Count Dracula has just been slain by Trevor Belmont and his party of heroes. And this makes Isaac even more absolutely furious. If Hector hadn't ran away, he wouldn't have had to leave Dracula's side. If he'd killed Hector all those years ago, he would have been able to defend Dracula or die with him. It's Hector's fault that his lord is destroyed, and he could never forgive this. He draws his spear once more and Hector wins. Isaac's emotions lead him to throw the fight. In true supervillain fashion, he falls off a cliff to die off screen. Hector collapses, bleeding from his new injuries, and again, he figures he'll just die as well, alongside his former master and former companion. But once again, Rosalie saves the day, taking him back to the village. Dracula's reign of terror has come to an end. His most loyal servants are out of commission. The massacre cease. Hector's reluctant to accept this happy ending at first. He tries to leave the village as soon as possible, but faces fierce resistance from the townsfolk. They like him. Rosalie likes him. This is a world in which devil forgery is no longer necessary, in which the forces of evil wane and fizzle out. His fear of being driven away isn't really relevant anymore, and so eventually, he just stays. Hector and Rosalie would eventually become husband and wife, and that is that. The closing of this story. This manga is really interesting to me because it's a full story with tied up character arcs and a neat happy ending. Isaac and Hector are opposites of one another, perfect rivals. Isaac is hot-headed, cruel, devoted to evil and to his master, while Hector is calm, empathic, yet looks out mostly for himself. These two clash because thematically they're meant to clash. They're antagonistic, each representing a contrasting aspect of Dracula's own evil. Their conflict concludes with Isaac dying, and the reason he dies is, well, because he's stupid. He's a complete maniac fighting blindly for a monstrous vampire that couldn't give less of a shit about him, and when said vampire just goes and dies, he completely loses his mind and makes a fatal mistake in his rage. Hector, in contrast, survives precisely because he didn't fall into that rabbit hole, because Hector remained human. In the end, Hector's life is saved by the people he protected literally minutes ago. It's instant positive karma. And they even give him another shot at life, which someone as unforgivably evil as Isaac could never hope to have. Of course, I imagine many of you watching this video are aware that this manga is supposed to be a prequel, not just to Dracula's Curse, but also to another game, which is in fact the main topic of this video. What a long introduction, right? So you're probably wondering, if this comic is a prequel and its story arc is all neatly tied up, Why is there a game after this? Oh well. I lied. In 1479, 3 years after Dracula's death, Rosalie burns at the stake. Her reported crime? Witchcraft. Hector arrives too late. He watches his loved one burn to embers, wordlessly, barely believing this could even be real. It wasn't true, of course. Rosalie had never messed with anything remotely close to witchcraft, not even normal magic, but the townsfolk were rabid. See, another thing I neglected to mention is that after Dracula's death, not all was fine. Sure, he was gone, and so were his armies, but there was still something weird going on in Valahia, and it's been going on for the past 3 years at this point. Disease ravages the land, shadows seem longer. The monsters haven't really disappeared like everyone hoped, they're just better at hiding now. And a dark cloud looms over the hearts of men and women alike. Dracula's influence still roams Valahia like an invisible force, a curse of sorts. It seems the bastard has truly transcended even immortality to remain a pain in the ass even after he's been vanquished. The angry townsfolk burning Rosalie here, they're victims of the curse too. The curse induces mindless violence, the same mindless violence that had possessed the Count himself before. Hector is able to fight back these feelings, but not all people are. I find it really interesting that Dracula's curse causes Rosalie to be executed in much the same way as Dracula's own wife had been, a fitting punishment for the traitorous general, perhaps. Of course, it's not just the curse's fault, there's also a bit of Isaac's machinations in there. That's right, he's fucking alive, because no main villain falling off a cliff has ever actually been dead. For the past 3 years, Isaac has been seething in the background, procuring a way to enact his revenge on his most despised foe. And here stand the fruits of his labor. Hector's hard-earned happy life after Dracula's demise has suddenly been snatched away in such brutal fashion. The comic leaves us on a cliffhanger. From here on out, Hector once again ventures into the night, seeking vengeance and the definitive death of his former partner in crime. Before we move on, there's another manga which also adapts the final part of the story, but it's very quick and abridged. It's called Prelude to Revenge, and it came with the pre-order of the game we're about to get into. It's told a little differently, but it follows the same general beats of the fight between Hector and Isaac and Rosalie's death, except here she's hanged instead of being burned. I think burning is a better choice thematically for how it ties itself to Lisa Tepesh. Okay, so enough dilly-dallying. You came here to hear about the game, so let's talk about the fucking game, shall we? Castlevania Curse of Darkness. Released in 2005 for the PS2, this one's a 3D-vania very much based off of Lament, which I've already covered. So it's kinda like a spiritual sequel to Lament, but on the timeline it takes place 3 years after Castlevania 3, which is a very different game from it, suffice it to say. I had already played Curse of Darkness once before, and my opinions on it are very similar to the ones I had on Lament. I'll elaborate as we go, of course.
1476, Galicia. A great war raged between Show yourself, Isaac! I know you're here!
Hector follows Isaac into the ruins of Dracula's castle, without realizing he's just falling into his trap. See, Hector relinquished his powers, he's 24 now, and hasn't used them in 3 years. Isaac knows this, and he could easily kill Hector right here. But that's not his goal.
Couldn't even protect your own woman. And now you think to
It's never been. Isaac wants to make Hector suffer, that's why he got Rosalie to burn. So instead of finishing it all right now, he decides to play this little game. He runs off into the shadows of the abandoned castle and leaves Hector to follow suit. Throughout the game, we'll be pursuing Isaac and reawakening our powers as we move through each area. It's a dumb little plot to justify the game happening, instead of Isaac just killing us right off the bat. Lament does the same with Walter's whole gamer mindset. It's kinda silly, but I guess it makes sense with how much of a lunatic Isaac is. The first area in the game is the abandoned castle, but before that, let's take a look at what we got for gameplay, right? COD plays pretty similar to Lament of Innocence. The movement is about the same, and the combat is only slightly modified. Instead of having light and heavy attacks, in this game you only have one attack option, which is on the square button. If, however, you press circle, like in the middle of a combo, you perform a combo finisher, which ends your combo with a special move. This move is different depending on which part of the combo you use it on. It's a bit more simplified, but I think it works pretty well. It's easy to understand, and you don't need to unlock any special moves, you have all of them from the get-go. Furthermore, you have a lot more weapon options. Leon Belmont could only use the whip, but in this game there's no whip to be found. Instead, Hector can wield many different weapons, and they all fit within 5 weapon types: sword, axe, spear, knuckles, and special, which contains the weirder, jokey or gimmicky weapons. Each weapon type has its own unique combo, and even within these types you have like subtypes, like the rapier or the heavy swords, which are both swords but work entirely differently from one another. This new weapon system, combined with the revamped combo system, adds a lot of variety to the gameplay. One of the main issues with Lament for me was how stale it got to play, and I think Curse does a decent job of addressing this issue. If you're getting bored of using the sword you start out with, just grab the hatchet and shake it up. You'll see me changing weapons a lot in the footage. And speaking of which, another thing that's unique to this game is its crafting system, which is dubbed by the game as Combine. See, unlike in most RPG games, Hector doesn't just find his weapons lying around. He makes them himself, putting together scavenged materials and using alchemy to produce increasingly dangerous equipment. Sometimes you can even fuse entire weapons together to make a new weapon. There's a whole complex crafting table to this game. I think this crafting system is cool, but also kind of clunky and hard to grasp at times. I'll elaborate later in the video. You can also craft armor, by the way, though in typical JRPG fashion, what armor you're wearing doesn't actually show on your character model, it's just like, it just boosts your defense. Still on this JRPG feel, yes, there is now a level up system like in Symphony. It's pretty straightforward. As you kill enemies, you get experience, and when you get enough experience, you level up and get some stat boosts. It serves as an incentive to not just walk past enemies and actually fight them. I have problems with this approach, but I'll let it slide for now. And finally, to get this early analysis over with, you have the pretty elaborate Innocent Devil system. Instead of having sub-weapons, Hector can use his hearts to fuel demonic conjurations which aid him on his journey. We start out without any devils in our pocket, since Hector is very weak right now. But as we make our way through these monsters, we reach a weird summoning room which we can use.
This unearthly power, is it coming from that tombstone? Release to me one of the tortured souls. Let me infuse him with my life force and awaken him to the world of the living. Immaculate being, appear before me now!
As Hector once again summons an innocent devil into this world, he's met by a strange man in black robes, appearing out of nowhere and naming himself Zed. Zed's apparently come to this land to extinguish Dracula's curse, and he's not a big fan of Isaac either. He tells us he's fled through the mountains towards a temple, and after thanking him, Hector leaves to give pursuit. Innocent devils are so called because, despite the name, they don't actually have any inherent evil to them. They're built from infernal magic, sure, but they serve only their master with no personal intentions. Now in gameplay terms, they're fairly more complicated than that. There's 5 different types of them, and we just got ourselves the fairy type devil. The devils are kind of like Pokemon. You can conjure them and have them follow you around, and they can fight for you or use special abilities by consuming their hearts. If they run out of hearts though, they're temporarily out of commission, and they can also lose hearts by taking damage, so you have to be kinda careful with them. That part's not really a big problem for the fairy though, cause it doesn't normally engage in combat. The fairy's only ability for now is heal level 1, which, as it sounds, heals us for a bit of HP. It's useful. It can also open chests, which is very situational. It's a pretty useful little guy, but not the most interesting. The fairy unlocks more abilities as it levels up, and they're generally support-oriented, so the fairy is kinda like the healer devil, you could say. I'd like to reinstate the Pokemon comparison, by the way, because these guys can also evolve. If you collect enough evil crystals, which are random drops from enemies, you can get them to change form. But it's actually not that straightforward, because each weapon type produces a different evil crystal, and depending on what crystals you collect, you can get a different evolution. And there's this whole chain of evolution paths that are very confusing, and the game doesn't tell you jack shit about it. It's fucking mental. I think this game does a very poor job of conveying many of its mechanics, but oh well. The evolution system is cool, I guess, it's just hard to figure out on your own. For this run, I decided to evolve my fairy into a Herbist, then a Hornet, then a Comet Star. You'll see me switching weapons around as the game goes on to make sure I get this specific line of evolution. Whew! That's a lot of new stuff coming from Lament. Now for something old, shitty level design, yay! Yeah, I don't like the level design of this game either. In fact, I'd argue it's worse than Lament. And the first area here, which again is the abandoned castle, is already a very good show of what's to come. Don't get me wrong, I like this area aesthetically. You have the dark, stony halls looking like they're falling apart, the walkways through the outside, a partially sunken area inhabited by fishmen, a cave, the castle dungeons, and a fancier structure closer to the top. It really feels like a tribute to the version of Dracula's castle we see in the classic Vanias, like in Castlevania 3, except of course it's way easier, as most of Dracula's forces have already been wiped out by now. It's a cool place, really. But that doesn't mean it's well designed. Curse of Darkness in general is filled with boring flat rooms, long-ass hallways with enemies you can completely ignore, really big maps that aren't fun at all to explore because your walk speed is agonizingly slow, and the game pretty much does away with what little puzzles and platforming Lament had. It's a really boring game, and you can see this right from the get-go. The abandoned castle is just straight line, combat, straight line, combat, straight line, combat ad nauseum. My experience playing Curse of Darkness is generally not very good. It's a game that has its highs, but it's mostly made up of lows. The combat is decent, but it ain't good enough to save it, in my opinion. Speaking of highs though, we're about to reach a boss fight at the top of this tower. In Lament of Innocence, boss fights were my favorite part of the game, so you might be wondering if that repeats itself here. And well, yes. We saved the game in this weird chair room and head to the castle's exit. The Crazy Armor is a giant set of armor powered by spinning gears and possessed by evil forces. Animated suits of armor are pretty commonplace in this franchise, you see them a lot, and this one is just a more powerful example. These guys are just generally inspired by pop culture. I think everybody has watched some form of media that had a creepy suit of armor possessed by a ghost. Crazy Armor specifically though reminds me a lot of the medieval fantasy Iron Golem, which was popularized by early Dungeons & Dragons. This guy wields a cleaver on one hand and an axe on the other, and it can shoot its head like a missile, which is really cool. It even has a second phase where it reassembles as a fire-spitting monster. Great first boss. Its defeat unlocks an elevator which allows us to descend into a new area called the Baljan Mountains, which is interesting. Last video I theorized the castle might be located by the western coast of the Black Sea, but now here we are in these damn mountains. There's two options here. Either we're in the Dobruja Plateau, which is close to the sea, or much more likely we're in the Carpathian Mountains, which dominate central Romania. In the Dracula novel, the castle is indeed located in the Carpathians, though it's said to be in Transylvania rather than Wallachia. So maybe I was wrong last video. Maybe it's not on the Black Sea, but rather in the northern region of Wallachia, like very, very close to the Transylvania border, on a lake somewhere in the mountains. Although, Curse has this little world map that looks like it's centered around a shoreline. I guess it could still be a lake. Who knows, really. You probably noticed the new devil that's walking around with me here. This is a Magmart, which is a battle-type devil that you get right at the start of the Belgian mountains. Battle types are the physically stronger devils which punch your enemies around, but are also more vulnerable to taking damage. They have some cool battle skills and also utility, depending on what evolution path you take. I'll be evolving him into a speed male, then into a corpsey. Moving on from the summoning room, Belgian Mountains is comprised of a series of mountainous paths, populated by ancient architecture, zombies, wolves, lizardmen, and sniper orcs. It's not too interesting a place, honestly, but we eventually meet this strange lady who seems to be collecting herbs, maybe?
It can't be. That's impossible. She can't be alive.
Oh.
This is Julia Laforese, a witch hailing from the west, who's been fleeing from the witch hunts. Her appearance strongly reminds Hector of Rosalie, but this seems to be a coincidence. Julia sounds a bit knowledgeable on Isaac, surprisingly, and though she doesn't have much to say, she is inclined to help. We can meet her in her house shortly after, where she acts as a vendor of simple potions and items. In this regard, she's not as useful as Ronaldo from Lament, but her real attraction is her devil forging. Yeah, apparently Julia knows a thing or two about devil forging, which is interesting. You can use her to store innocent devils like a Poké Center, or create new devils by using devil shards, which are these random drops your devils give out. I didn't grapple much with the devil creation system, I mostly just stuck with the ones that the game gives you, so I didn't talk much to Julia, unfortunately. Not that she has much to say anyways. While Ronaldo in Lament got multiple cutscenes to flesh out his character, Julia just kinda stands behind the counter, not saying anything. Oh well. After using a cannon to burst open an old fortress gate, meeting these weird cockatrices, and further climbing to jagged peaks, we are met with the roars of a most terrible foe. The Wyvern. Wyverns are frequently seen in medieval European mythology. They're draconic beings with 2 legs and 2 wings, sometimes fire-breathing, and they show up often in fantasy and Castlevania in general. I wonder why it's attacking us though. Are we crossing into its territory, perhaps? Or maybe the Wyvern is also under the influence of the curse? This fight is like Sin from DS2, but not as cool. You gotta aim for the head while avoiding its attacks, but sometimes it'll just start flying and be really annoying and refuse to come down. Not the hardest thing ever, though. Descending the mountain, we approach Garibaldi Temple, which is where we heard Isaac was headed. As we reach the entrance, though, we meet yet another bizarre character in this game. Behold, Saint Germain.
I won't bandy words with you.
So as you can clearly see, this guy's very weird. His clothes don't match the time period at all, and he's telling us to stop pursuing Isaac. After saying that, he just disappears, and Hector doesn't give a shit. The temple is seemingly a Christian cathedral, completely abandoned in the middle of a forest, but absolutely overrun by monsters of all kinds. And hey look! This time the Gothic style of architecture actually makes sense since it's 1479. I don't know if this kind of church was common for Eastern Orthodoxy, though. After fighting through floating swordsmen, invisible swordsmen, and these annoying pieces of shit that jump around and throw bombs at you, we find not Isaac. Yeah, he's ran away again. There's just this funny guy with a whip here. Oh, holy shit! Trevor Belmont was not unaware of the effects of Dracula's curse. 3 years earlier, when he was still recovering by Syphocide, he'd already sensed something was off. As soon as he could, he set out on a new journey by himself, to finally rid the world of evil. Just like Hector, he's pursuing Isaac, and it's that fact that led these two to meet each other here. As expected, Trevor's really strong, and we barely do damage to him. We don't actually have to beat him, just get him down to a certain amount of health, and after we do this, he realizes we're not the Devil Forge Master he was looking for, but rather the other guy who deserted Dracula's army.
You're not Trevor Belmont, the one who defeated Lord Dracula.
We trade names and part ways for now, in what is pretty much a race to see who gets the Isaac first. Trivia: Trevor's got a scar on his face in this game, which is pretty emblematic. This scar was obtained in the fight against Dracula. He had to put a bandage over it and everything. Unfortunately, the Netflix writer didn't actually read the lore, so he just gave Trevor the scar from the get-go, which is way more lame. Shortly after, our speed male learns the brute force skill, which allows it to lift heavy doors. With this, we use a teleporter room to warp back to Belgian mountains, buy stuff from Julia, and open a new pathway where we may search for our mortal enemy.
I'm pleased to see you are unharmed.
Zed tells us Isaac is now heading through a forest towards a village on the other side, which, considering how much we'll have to walk to get there, is irredeemably evil. He confirms that Isaac is actually the very source of the curse. Maybe it's being maintained through him. And then Zed runs away? Something seems to scare him, and he just walks off. Immediately after, Saint Germain teleports behind us. It looks like him and Zed are enemies then, for some reason. But he doesn't explain, so we just have to keep wondering like fucking idiots. Oh well. We must now travel through Mordvia Aqueduct, which is likely more remains of Dracula's castle from what we explored in Castlevania 3. The journey through here is, well, you've probably noticed the pattern now, right? In Lament of Innocence there were fewer levels to explore, but each level had its own gimmick and puzzles you needed to solve before beating it. In Curse of Darkness that's not really a thing. There's a whole lot more levels in the game, sure, but they all consist of walking, finding enemies, walking more, fighting more enemies, and eventually finding the boss. Mordvia Aqueduct has some pretty scenery, especially when you get to the inside area, but it's really just more of the same. Except this time you have fishmen, demons, and bone dragons. I know a lot of people like this game, I do, I just have a hard time finding it entertaining most of the time. It's not a miserable experience, mind you, it's just very tiresome. The boss in this area is the Skeleton Diver, who's actually really radical. He attacks us after this bridge collapses, riding a skeletal fish and wielding a trident. I love this fight. The diver and the fish work together for some pretty baller moves, though much like the wyvern, it can get annoying when the diver just refuses to fight you. After we kill them, they spontaneously explode and raise the stairs for us. How helpful. Climbing those stairs, we find a room to conjure our first bird-type devil, a crow. This one is pretty cool. Its only ability for now is Glide, which lets us cross wide gaps, but as it levels up, it gets some really gnarly offensive abilities, such as Carpet Bombing. I'll be evolving it into a Skullwing, then a Wingosaurus, then an Indigo, which looks damn awesome. If we backtrack a bit, we can use Glide to hop over this chasm by the save room and head towards the forest Zed mentioned. As we're entering it though, we see Zed and Saint Germain.
Beyond your bounds. You mustn't.
It seems Zed's pretty pissed off with this weirdo, so he pulls out an arm blade to slice him in half, though Germain just teleports around and then goes away. Zed proceeds to mumble some shit to no one and exits the forest through a rift in space. Who is this guy? Yeah, this tells us two things. First, these two bastards are weird as hell, and second, they're definitely enemies. We already knew both of those things, but okay. The Forest of Jiggermont is as basic as it gets. We start out amidst bountiful trees, but also head into mountainous paths and eventually a cave. And there's ruins scattered about here. It reminds me of Dracula's curse with the forest and the cave after the swamp, and it even has cyclopes, or red ogres I guess. But I mean, it's not nearly as interesting as the levels in Dracula's curse. There's these walking armors, which are new I guess. And as we're reaching the town on the other side, we cross an ancient underground coliseum of sorts, and we're greeted by a gargantuan minotaur who uses pillars as weapons. Really like this guy, he's a fun boss too. The Minotaur from Greek mythology was a bull-headed monster locked up in a labyrinth by the king Minos. He was born by the wife of Minos, who was cursed by Poseidon to have sex with a bull. It's a long story. Anyways, pretty dangerous beast. When you kill him in this game, he turns to stone, falls and breaks apart, which doesn't resonate with the mythology. But maybe the implication is he was just a statue all along, given life by dark forces? I mean, if we follow the lore in the last video, we know for a fact that Atlantis was actually built pretty close to Dracula's castle, so it is certainly possible that a lot of Greek culture and imagery made its way into Valhalla. The cave opens into Cordova town, this little medieval village, which looks completely deserted, besides the zombies and other spooky things. And it's here that we finally meet the piece of shit we've been running after.
Isaac! It's still too soon, but all the same. I'll test your abilities and see how much of your power has been restored!
I guess it's as good a time as any to briefly discuss the modern portrayals of Hector and Isaac here. If you're coming from the Netflix series, you're probably familiar with a much weaker and less impressive Hector and a completely different Isaac, both in appearance and personality. Yeah, the Netflix versions of these two are really different people. I don't mind, personally. The Netflix series is so different from the games, it doesn't really matter. I know a lot of people complain about the race swap that happened with Isaac, but honestly I couldn't give less of a shit about it. I actually quite like his design in the animation. It's pretty cool and unique. His design in the game here is, well, I think the best way to describe game Isaac is he looks like a JoJo villain, which isn't necessarily bad, but it feels really weird when you compare him to other characters in the series with these stripper-ass clothes in the 15th century. It's probably supposed to represent his madness, bro went so insane he's just wearing these tighter clothes now, just showing all the tattoos on his body. But I'm not the biggest fan of his whole insane shtick either. I don't think he's that interesting a villain. But enough talk, have at you. Isaac is wielding the Shavisohi, which is the strongest spear in the game, and he's accompanied by his devil, Abel, which is a type we don't have yet. Chose to fight him with a metal glove, just to punch his face in. He took out my corpsey, but then I just used my Wingosaurus to bombard him. It's a great fight. You have to balance dodging Abel while staggering Isaac as much as possible, and in the background you can have your own devil laying chaos on the battlefield to keep either busy. It just feels really awesome. And I feel like I gotta comment on the naming convention here too. Isaac's name could very likely be a reference to the 1893 vampire story A Kiss of Judas, where a man named Isaac dies and is reborn as a vampire to enact revenge. Much in the same way as Isaac nearly died in his previous fight with Hector, and has now returned to make him suffer as retribution for his betrayal. The Isaac in the book is a redhead as well. But Isaac is also a biblical character, and that's probably why his little pet is named Abel. Now, Abel in the Bible was the first guy to ever be murdered, like in history. I don't think that relates, honestly, but it's a cool fact. Unfortunately, Isaac is just playing with us. He wants us to regain our powers, remember? So he can crush us at our highest or some stupid villain shit like that. And before he can think of getting serious, a little interruption happens.
Enough!
Brother, stop!
Julia! Return! Abel!
Fucking Julia is Isaac's sister. This is a weird twist. It's not very foreshadowed, it's not really elaborated on, like we never get to learn their backstory or anything like that, but it does explain why Julia has some Forge Master adjacent magics in her belt. These two were probably born with these talents, though Julia likely never sought out Dracula's castle to actually properly develop them. Isaac runs away. Julia stopped Hector because, well, she knows he's not strong enough yet, but she does want him to defeat Isaac. Julia tells us Isaac, too, is under the influence of the curse. It's rotted his mind with perversion and violence. She believes Hector is the only one worthy of saving her brother, his former comrade, and someone knowledgeable enough to destroy Dracula's curse for good. We get our first mage-type devil, which I'll be evolving into a scissor rod, then Nautilus, then eyeball rod. He's a small little guy who floats around and casts spells, though the only one you start out with is Time Stop, which is self-explanatory. Time Stop is mostly used for puzzles, but it's a great combat spell as well. Then after this, we don't really get any direction. Like, no NPC tells us where to go, we just go. Where are we going? How do we know where Isaac is? I guess the writers just fucking gave up, which I get, I can feel that. The next area is an Elmos machine tower, which is a ruined clock tower with some pretty challenging monsters, and finally some kind of puzzle, Christ. For these two rooms you have to keep hitting this bolt on the wall, so the platform keeps rising, but you also have to kill enemies. And there's this one where you break a cog. Really simple stuff, but it's cool to see, I guess. Our investigations lead us to the very top of the machine tower, where we meet Saint Germain.
Oh, an unexpected guest.
He's stuck up here, even though he can teleport. How odd. And apparently it was Zed who did it. He says some stuff about time, like he's been freed from limits of some kind, and that he can now actually physically interact with stuff in this specific place at the machine tower. So Germain's a time traveler of some sort, but of course Hector has no fucking clue what's going on. He pulls out a sword and challenges us to battle so he can test out his hypothesis. And this is another one of the coolest bosses. Germain teleports around doing sword strikes, he can stop time, sprout overgrowth from the ground. When you think you've killed him, he rewinds his health bar, and in this second phase he's got a fucking gun. Just a straight up revolver, just pulls that out of his pockets and bang! Great boss. When he's beat, he seems pretty cool with it too, and tells us we've got a new fate flowing out of ourselves. Whatever that means, and then he just goes away. Fucking time travelers, man. Still at the tower top, we nab the final devil type, which is the devil type. Yeah, this one is almost like the fairy, but it's actually pretty aggressive and attacks your enemies alongside you. It only has one evolution path, but to get to that final form, you actually need 100 crystals, specifically obtained with the Shavisuhi, which is Isaac's spear. And I didn't craft that for this playthrough, so you're not gonna see it. Although, by the way, the final form is called The End, which is the form Abel had when we fought Isaac. As expected, the first ability our devil gets is Utility. We can use Magic Circle to turn into a magic puddle, and move below some cracks on the walls. What a weird power. There's a few of these scattered throughout the game, and you can use the devil to go under them, but the most noteworthy is the one in Cordova Town, which leads to a new region called Iolon Ruins. Again, we're never told so in-game, but Isaac went this way, so we should be close to encountering him yet again, and hopefully for the last time. Throughout this ridiculous cat-and-mouse game, Hector has greatly resharpened his skills, both physical and magical. He's already duly equipped with high-level weapons and armor, and can conjure 5 different devils to his aid, all very powerful. I said this before, but Isaac is doing this on purpose. He wants Hector to be in his prime. It's part of his whole idiotic villain plan to fight him fairly. Isaac has always had a few screws loose, and of course, through Julia, we now know the curse is worsening his mental state. His poor choice in giving us this extended chase sequence will certainly bite him in his ass pretty soon. I don't have much to say about the Iolan ruins. They seem like a pretty old medieval-style temple or fortress, which heads into a cave system. The enemies are tough, but nothing too special. These Slogras are annoying, I suppose. There's a secret exit here, by the way, which leads back to the abandoned castle. There's actually a few more of these in the game, but I didn't find many of them. Oh, and by the way, we do find Isaac, though Trevor's found him first.
You are not without skill.
They have a really cool enemy fight, and it seems like they're actually pretty close in power, but when Isaac sees Hector arrive, he reconsiders. Teleports away, usual villain monologue, blah blah blah.
Without fail. Without fail.
Trevor acknowledges us as an ally here. He recognizes we're both enemies to Isaac, but he still set him killing him alone, which is obviously not gonna happen. Hector wants to kill Isaac with his own hands, regardless of what Trevor thinks. But once again, they part ways. We're left without a fucking clue where to go, because Isaac is an asshole, but this time someone actually shows up to help us, and it's Zed again. Apparently there's a secret chamber at the top of the ruined castle, the beginning of the game, and that's where Isaac went. So that's good, it should be easy enough to get back there. When Hector mentions Germain sent Zed his regards, Zed gets pretty uncomfortable. Seems they really don't like each other, huh?
Is that you, Hector?
It is. I was told a hidden chamber lies beneath this castle. Isaac is there now.
What? That's not possible. In order to open the passage to that chamber, the blood of my clan must... Oh. So that is why he fought me earlier.
What is it, Belmont?
It cannot be avoided. You must show me just how much power you've gained.
Wait! I have no reason to fight you!
This is your reason. Defend yourself!
And this is our real fight with Trevor Belmont. A test of strength. He fights about the same as he did last time, but even more aggressively. The vampire killer looks like a floppy lightsaber for some reason, but his combos are really dangerous and tough to move around. He occasionally uses sub-weapons, and he's got some sort of magic barrier spell that temporarily increases his poise, so he's really hard to stagger. But I beat him with this big-ass sword that looks like the Dragon's Lair. It was pretty epic. Trevor is very impressed with this battle. We've passed his challenge. He's now confident that we can actually tread ahead and seek Isaac by ourselves. By dripping his own Belmont blood on the floor, he undoes the magic seal in this room and opens a portal. Trevor's not heading in with us. I don't know why exactly, but he sends Hector alone. Maybe he wants to act as a guard for the portal or something. Either way, Hector won't falter. This is exactly what he wanted. If he's strong enough to impress the Belmonts, he can definitely take Isaac by now, even on his own. Not even knowing what's on the other side, he plunges.
And when you have him, show him no mercy.
This is the Infinite Corridor. Now you're probably wondering, what in God's name is this? And yeah, why is there a portal to another dimension inside Dracula's castle? And why was it opened specifically with bone blood? Well, it's complicated. We're gonna delve a little more into this in future videos, but one thing I've neglected to mention is that the castle is a living creature, kind of. It's a being fueled by chaos and an entity intrinsically linked with Dracula's soul. That's why it collapsed when Trevor defeated Dracula. This has some very interesting implications, the most important of which is that the castle is also linked to the curse. Dracula, his castle, his curse, they're all manifestations in some form of that forgotten god's chaotic powers. This infinite corridor here seems to be a realm of chaos, a place that doesn't quite exist, treading through the seams of reality. Some parts of it almost look like the actual castle we started on, but others are completely abstract, floating platforms of bizarre green blocks. This might be the place that gave birth to the castle. And I know this doesn't make any damn sense, like, if you're coming from the Netflix series, the castle there was a machine that teleports, but that's it. It wasn't like a devilish construction by an evil deity of chaos. Just keep some of it in mind. I promise it will make more sense when we return to this discussion way later in the series. The Infinite Corridor is unfortunately kind of disappointing. Like you're in this weird alternate dimension where nothing makes sense and reality falls apart, and it sounds so cool. But in true Curse of Darkness fashion, all that you get is corridors. I know that's in the name, but save me, boss fight. Dullahan is a giant headless knight, wielding a sword and a shield seemingly made of tortured human souls. He's a very powerful being, sent by Isaac to terminate us. He's based on Irish mythology, in which he's portrayed as a headless horseman that roams the countryside, a sort of dark fairy creature. He does show up a tad in the Castlevania series, though this specific portrayal reminds me a lot of the Skull Knight from Berserk, with the Behelit sword and all. This boss is, I believe, the second one in the whole game I ever died to. Very challenging, very satisfying to fight. He's got all sorts of crazy attacks like explosions, lasers, and just swings. Had to use a bunch of my devils against him. A really tough foe, and very fittingly, I'd say. When we vanquish Dullahan, we'll be heading into the final region of the game, and only 3 bosses will remain. but I'll be opting not to talk about that yet. Don't worry, we'll get right back to the story, but first I'd like to explore some more of the optional stuff in COD. So I mentioned the crafting system some time ago. I said I didn't like it that much, thought it was clunky. Yeah, I already thought that at the beginning of the game to a certain extent, but my feelings were only exacerbated by the end. And to illustrate that, let me show you the laser blade. The laser blade is one of the strongest weapons in the game, and it's one of the only ones I really went out of my way to make. It's created by combining 9 different swords with a rare material called purple glitter, and a lot of those 9 swords are made with other swords as well, like the 7-bladed sword, which is made with 7 other swords. It's a net total of almost 20 swords to make the laser blade, plus all the other materials you gotta get. It's a logistical nightmare, and again, the game is not very good at explaining how any of this works, and the crafting interface is really primitive. To top it off, the way you get these materials is not the most intuitive either. I hadn't explained earlier, but there's a stealing mechanic in this game. Like, each enemy has a certain window in which Hector can steal from them, and these stolen items can really vary from healing items to important crafting materials. And in my legendary quest to forge the laser blade, the shittiness of this system was really put to light. I needed some really specific materials, and so I needed to travel back to previous areas and seek specific enemies from which I could steal them from, and sometimes I didn't even know how, because even stealing can be hard. You have to figure out the window and what to do. Not to mention it's hard to know what enemies drop what. I was using the wiki, and of course I had to walk a lot, and you all know how I feel about walking in this game. Christ! It wasn't all that bad. It was a cool experience, I guess, and it really makes you feel like you're worthy of the weapon when you actually manage to craft it. But I don't want to repeat it ever again. The purple glitter, by the way, can be stolen from Dullahan himself, and I crafted the laser blade sometime after beating him. It's a fun weapon. A bit of a boring moveset, but it gets points for style. Aside from that whole tangent, there are some optional areas which don't really tie into the story. First up is the Tower of Eternity, which you can enter from the forest. This consists of a 50-story tower in which nearly every floor is filled with enemies and you gotta get to the top. It's a cool idea, but I don't find it very interesting personally. It's just really long and tiresome. The reward at the top lets you equip more accessories, which is cool I guess, and from here you can either jump down to leave or glide towards the moon to access the Tower of Evermore. This is another 50-story tower that goes down instead of up, and it's way harder than the first one. I didn't beat this one, honestly, not worth it. You need pretty good stats and pretty good devils to stand a chance, and I didn't really want to grind. But it's there if you want the challenge. The last optional area is found in the catacombs below Garibaldi Temple. You can reach them by using your devil type to slide through some cracks. This place is really eerie and grotesque, and there's some weird enemies floating around. They're just set dressing though. The real thing is the secret boss we can find. In this really tall room made of flesh and bones, we can meet Legion for the first time. Another recurring boss in the series, and this is one of the creepier ones. Legion's a bit of a biblical reference. There's a scene in the New Testament where Jesus meets a man who's possessed by demons, and when asked for a name, he replies, "We are Legion, for we are many." Creepy devil stuff. So the way the devs adapted that for Castlevania was they made a big ball of people, like actual corpses hugging together into a ball of meat that floats around and whacks the player. It's really metal. In this game it doesn't do much though. It's protected by these things sprouting from the ground, but it doesn't actually fight back as you destroy it piece by piece. When you finally reach the core in the middle, you can make it drop to the floor and begin, oh man, the second phase. This one is Nucleus, a giant made of light. It was probably the result of some eldritch ritual created by the uncountable human sacrifices that made up the Legion. We've freed it now, but according to its description in-game, it's still imperfect at this time. Which is interesting, because Nucleus is one of the strongest bosses in the game. Its existence does raise some questions like who created it, who performed the ritual, why was it below the Garibaldi temple, does it have anything to do with Dracula or the curse? We don't get any answers. Much like the Forgotten One in Lament, Nikolai's is pretty mysterious. This guy does a lot of damage, has some stretchy limbs, throws shit around, death lasers, becomes huge, and after beating it, you get jack shit. Well, it was fun anyways. And I think that's about all I have to say. I'll comment on some other things in the video outro, but for now we're good to go. Let's wrap things up, right? Isaac needs to go to hell already, so let's get back to Delahan in the Infinite Corridor. After Delahan is beat, he disintegrates into a torrent of souls, and this triggers something. Both the corridor and the castle start shaking, and from a tide of violent waters, once more springs Dracula's full castle, once hidden below the waves. And this cannot be good. Meanwhile, Isaac happily takes the opportunity to stab Trevor in the back. Yeah, plot twist, the Delahan wasn't sent by Isaac. Apparently it was put there by Trevor, or one of his allies, to guard a special seal within the labyrinth. That's probably why the portal opened with Trevor's blood. It's very likely that he either helped create the portal or close the portal. The only way to fully break open the seal in the corridor was through a wave of demonic energy, but since Hector is a Devil Forge Master, his fight with Delahan was more than enough. The seal is shattered by Hector on accident. Reborn from chaos, Dracula's castle re-enters the physical world. If Dracula's curse was already so powerful and all-consuming, now it's completely unshackled. Dracula himself might be dead, sure, but for how long? If his influence is still so strong, what guarantees he's really gone? Isaac leaves Trevor to die in the abandoned section of the castle, currently collapsing. Hector is the only one who can save the world now. Dracula's castle can be accessed through Mordvia Aqueduct, risen from the waters. Still not sure if this is a lake or a sea, but honestly it doesn't matter, does it? Julia meets us for a pep talk before you go in. She has saved Trevor's life, but he's in no shape to fight, apparently. The castle is indeed the source of the curse, and we must venture through it, wish we to end it. Isaac's inside there as well. There's no running from this now. Dracula's castle is the last area in the game and is very tough, protected by some of the strongest monsters and demons brought back to life alongside our home. We start out in the exterior but then go inside and slowly make our way through what is essentially a gauntlet of combat rooms in a 7-story castle. It's pretty long but nothing you can't beat with the experience you have. Isaac is waiting for us at the 7th floor, and this time it's for real.
You shall die a most painful, gruesome death!
Isaac pulls out a damn laser blade for this fight, which is great, but unfortunately I hadn't crafted mine yet. He's much more aggressive this time around, and though he doesn't pull out Abel, he does use 3 different devils throughout the combat. A Crimson Bird type, an Ite battle type, and a Reset's battle type. Again, it really feels like the most epic Pokemon duo ever, plus the trainers are fighting as well. I just love this one. It feels so cool to fight an opponent that has the same skill set as you. The final legendary battle of Dracula's generals, Devil Forge Masters, the loyalist against the traitor. And the traitor wins.
Die, Isaac, die!
Hector almost loses himself to the curse here, succumbing to violence and vengeance. He stops just short of destroying Isaac's body, thanks to Julia's previous words of caution. But this isn't enough to stop the plan set in motion. To no one's surprise, Zed is a twist villain. Isaac was a mere pawn, barely even aware of what was really going on. The whole plot of this game was Zed's machination. He planned for Hector to regain his powers, reawaken the castle. Dracula's dead, true, but not for long. So long as he has a proper vessel, he may reincarnate through the influence of the curse. Zed was planning to use Hector as the vessel. He was the better candidate, but since he managed to resist the curse, Isaac will have to do instead. At this point, we're all wondering who the fuck even is Zed? But well, Dracula's right-hand man, no matter how many times he's lain, will always return to serve the Lord of the Vampires. Welcome back to the Death Dimension. Time to fight Death for the third time. This fight is honestly a little easier than the one in Lament, because he doesn't move around as much, but it's otherwise similar. Slashes, flying scythes, explosions, the whole package. But as we've learned in the manga, Hector's powers as a Forge Master rival even those of Death. We don't have much time. Dracula may have already taken hold of Isaac's body, and Trevor is not here to beat him again. As we approach the Shattered Throne Room at the very tallest tower, we find it's already too late.
The traitor Hector.
Lord Dracula, you are reborn!
Why did you betray me?
Why did you unleash your hatred upon the humans? When you began slaughtering them indiscriminately, I had no choice but to disobey you!
You side against me for the sake of humans. Humans are not worth the air they breathe. I was simply cleansing the world.
It is not your place to judge the worth of humans!
The powerful always judge the weak. The humans made their judgment of me as well. Thus, I sentenced them to extinction. Sympathy is merely a form of weakness. You betrayed me, Hector, and for that, the punishment is death.
I stand ready. I will not flee as I did before!
The Lord has possessed the body of Isaac and shapeshifted back into his true form. This is Hector's true redemption, his chance to pay for his crimes as Dracula's general. He must defeat him. This fight is similar to Walter's in Lament, though unfortunately Dracula doesn't whack you. He does suck you though. He's got some other cool spells too. His first form is no match for Hector, but he's only playing around. Dracula conjures the powers of darkness, and in an alternate realm of pure chaos, assumes the shape of a giant, flying bat demon. This is vaguely reminiscent of his final form in Dracula's Curse, which perhaps was the intention. He's a tad bit harder though. Instead of just standing still and shooting lasers, he actually straight up punches you, oh yes, and his lasers are way scarier. But even then, Dracula's not at his full power. It seems this reincarnation through Isaac was not complete, the vessel imperfect. Hector manages to defeat him all by himself.
The transformation, was it not complete?
So it would seem.
Oh, the curse. My soul may return to the abyss, but the curse will not be lifted. It will fester in the hearts of humans until they obliterate themselves.
Dracula's soul shatters back into the abyss. The curse remains, but as a Forge Master, Hector has an idea on how to handle it. With his final forge, he nullifies it, turning it harmless. As he stands over Isaac's corpse, and the throne room disintegrates into nothingness, he accepts his fate. Revenge and redemption completed, Hector can die in peace. But again, he's saved by a blonde woman who doesn't really fancy watching him die.
Farewell, Isaac.
The curse is lifted, and the King Vampire is dead for good, all loose ends neatly tied. His influence on the world can now officially be said to be over, at least as far as we know. The future is a hopeful one at last. Hector doesn't really know where to go in this new world, much like he didn't before, but Julia offers him a home. Her own. So that's another happy ending for this little couple, I guess. And that's Curse of Darkness. Okay, before I get to my comments on the game, I'd like to address Saint Germain a bit. He gets a little scene in the end here, just after the castle collapses. You know, Hector and Julia have this whole talk about hope and all that, but of course Saint Germain is a time traveler and he has a different opinion on the matter. It never does become clear what Germain was doing here. He wasn't just having fun, he seemed to have a special interest in Zed and Hector. Was there something wrong with the timeline? Did he have to fix something? God, I hate time travel plots. Most of them, anyways. They're just senseless and needlessly confusing. What's worse is, Saint Germain never shows up in the series ever again, so we'll never find out what he was doing here. And if you think about it, what did he do here? Like, literally in terms of plot. If you take out Saint Germain from the game, if he just does not exist in the game, what changes? Nothing. You could literally write Germain off the script, and the only difference would be one less boss fight. He's completely worthless to the narrative. God damn it, honestly. Sorry for the rant. Germain just really annoys me for some reason. I don't think he's really that bad. He's just there, I suppose. Otherwise, I think the plot in COD is fine. It is a very blatant retcon because Hector and Isaac did not exist in Castlevania 3, but it works for what it is. It's got some interesting stuff going on with the duality between Hector and Isaac, and it adds interesting lore with the existence of the curse. It is unfortunately held down by the fact that you can only really grasp the whole story if you read the manga. Like, the beef between Hector and Isaac is never really explained in the game, nor is Rosalie's entire existence. It's a bizarre choice to me that they separated the story like that. Then on the game itself, I've already given my extended complaints. It looks fine, it plays fine, it sounds amazing with this soundtrack, and the bosses are awesome, but it's severely dragged down by dog shit level design. I'd rather just play Lament, honestly. The gameplay of Lament is not as good, but at least it's a shorter game. Definitely don't want to replay Curse anytime soon, it's a very exhaustive experience. Some extra stuff. There's actually a 6th devil type, which is the pumpkin type. It's kind of a secret. You fight him in the 6th floor of Dracula's castle, but to conjure him, you first need to craft a pumpkin mace, which involves fighting some really tough items. Pumpkin is optional, he doesn't really do anything, but you get a general stat boost while you have him conjured. He can evolve, but all his evolutions are purely cosmetic. As a Lament, after beating the game, you can play Crazy Mode, which is harder, or you have Trevor Mode, where you play as Trevor. No cutscenes, just gameplay. Trevor is very strong, and his combos don't end when you press circle, so there's a lot more possible combinations between square and circle. He has no innocent doubles, but to compensate, he gets sub-weapons, and he can actually select all of them from the get-go. The knife, the axe, the holy water, the cross, and the stopwatch. They all work as you'd expect, but you can also use the Item Crush, which consumes more hearts, but is stronger. The Item Crush is a concept that was introduced in Rondo of Blood originally, so I'll go more in depth when we get to that game. Finally, there's no level up system here, but you do get stat boosts after every boss fight. So sounds like a pretty cool alternate mode to play and have fun with, right? Yeah, I don't really like it. Joachim was cool in the last game, but I don't find Trevor as satisfying here. I don't find him as satisfying as Hector even. The whip's moveset is just not that cool. It doesn't really feel like a whip, it just feels like you're punching people with a limp dick. This baffles me since Leon's gameplay in Lament was pretty cool, but Trevor isn't nearly ass. Leon had all these different elemental whips he could find, and they got all these cool effects, and Trevor has even more of those elemental whips, but they all look the same. They don't have any particles or anything. It all feels very lazy to me. As Hector, you had a bunch of different weapons and innocent devils to shake up the combat, but as Trevor, it's all pretty much the same throughout the whole game, and it really exposes how boring the game is. Joachim was fine because Lament wasn't that long, and his gameplay was often so easy you barely had to interact with the game anyways. Trevor is not exactly like that. He's fun for the first or second area, but the fantasy of playing a Belmont quickly wears off as the game goes on. They did not do him justice, I don't think. There's no special ending for beating Trevor mode, unfortunately. You just get some concept art in the credits. And finally, the chair room. Yeah, this game has a whole thing with chairs, the warp chairs, the save chairs, the cannon chairs, and there's a bunch of other funny or weird chairs you can find throughout the game. And every time you sit on a new chair, it shows up in the chair room, which can be accessed via Court of a Town. So you kind of like collect chairs in a way. That's the main collectible of this game. Collecting them doesn't do anything, it's just for fun, so I didn't bother doing so, especially since some areas you can only access with specific devil skills or evolutions, and I didn't feel like grinding out new devils just for this. But here's how it looks when it's completely filled with chairs. I'm using a game save I downloaded. Think that's it? Long ass video, right? I had to tie in the manga too for it to make any sense, my gods. We'll be going a little simpler for the next video, at least that's what I hope. I'll be delving into Christopher Beaumont. We'll see how it goes.